Hello and welcome back to Media Snack, live from New York.
Greetings from London.
So one of the things that we've probably missed in the last 12 months, many of you have probably felt the same, is nobody's attended any events, right? Any media, marketing, advertising conferences or events. And they were somewhat the mainstay of our industry.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, every year it would be some of the first things you put in your calendar each year. And you were either in or out, you were going to Cannes or you were in CES, you were a VIP or you weren't. It was very kind of like, velvet rope kind of thing around the events. But, some other big things like Demexco and Advertising Week and Festival of Media all radically changed last year, obviously, with different impacts. And so at the beginning of the year, typically, we're just a week after what should be CES, and it did happen this year, but it was obviously slightly very different. So we're just thinking about events actually, and more importantly, how we get together. So looking ahead to the future, if more of us are working remotely and more distributed ways, what role do these events play? Maybe they're even more important than they were.
Yeah.
And if so, how can they be better? Because they weren't perfect, and certainly not perfect. So we're going to just take a few minutes today just to think about those. And really a lot of that was provoked by some news that was emerging last week. Really good story in AdAge by Lindsay Rittenhouse, who's one of the writers at AdAge, who's actually going to join us on this show in a few minutes' time. She posted up about the Cannes Festival, the Cannes Lions, big advertising festival, normally takes place south of France, Cannes. In June, have announced that their intention is to do an in-person event. Cue widespread backlash from the industry saying, "Are you crazy? Like, we're not going anywhere."
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about the events, and then we'll bring Lindsay on, because I'm keen to hear any other rumors that she's heard about other events or the sentiment from agencies or potential attendees. Right. So what is going on when it comes to events?
Well, you're right. So at the beginning of the year, you tend to plot your calendar, your diary, looking for sunny spots in the world. January, you'd head off to Vegas for a little bit of CES. Then you might do a little bit of Rome, sort of in the springtime, and then summer in Cannes, and then you'd maybe do Florida in the autumn. And that was kind of great, because events and conferences for the marketing services community are brilliant aggregators of people, right? Amazing networking opportunities. You get all of your leadership, all the clients together. And then suddenly this year, everything changed, right? When you can't get together in person, all of these planned events had to suddenly pivot and become virtual. To kind of varying degrees of success, I think it would probably be kind of fair to say. Those events that perhaps weren't able to prepare properly for a virtual event suffered. In the worst cases, they became epically long, tedious Zoom fests where you would sit listening to more and more presenters, and they were kind of disastrous. In other cases, and I know that you attended the A&A event that was virtual this year, where they'd had time to think about using virtual event platforms. They was far more interactive. It was far more sophisticated in the way that they kind of engaged with their audience, right? But going into this year, when it's likely, certainly for the first half of the year, where events again will be virtual, it focuses more on the content and the agenda of these events. There is no hiding place any longer. There's no nice distractions of, rosé being drunk in hotel kind of courtyards in Cannes. There's no nice little parties to go to that will distract perhaps the event organizers from the core essence of what an event should be, which is inspiring, motivating, bringing new intelligence within the kind of the marketing community. So kind of that's where we're at the moment. What will the challenge be for event organizers and conference organizers this year, when perhaps some of the additional elements that camouflage some of the content discrepancies and failings of many events will no longer be there?
Yeah. Let's think of the implications.
Let's.
Good. So yeah, so what are the implications? Because it's interesting to kind of unpack actually why did we go to these things, as you say, and it wasn't really just necessarily, even maybe sometimes never really because of the agenda or the speakers. It was the networking and the time out of the office and see and be seen and all of that kind of stuff. So what value does that have? Maybe it has increased value now. I think in the last year, we've all spent so much time on this video. It's a big ask, isn't it? You're asking marketers, let's talk about the marketers. You're asking them to spend like more hours on video to attend events virtually. So because of that, and because they're not seeing the other additional benefits of the see and be seen and connect and the serendipity and the networking parts, then therefore the expectations of content are going to be far higher in a virtual setting. And you also, the other thing is that you can't really park the day job. You know, when everyone's going to Cannes, kind of day job kind of sits to the side. I mean, we've had large projects. We're working with advertisers that cover these summer months, and at some point, everybody says, "Oh no, nothing can happen that week because everyone's in Cannes," for example.
Yeah.
Right? So the kind of industry kind of slows down. That doesn't happen. I don't think I've seen that happening really. Even during CES last week, everybody's just still fully engaged. They're still on there doing their day job and then dipping into this stuff. So, as you said before, the focus of these marketing events has to be on the content. It has to revert back to its core, and the agenda has to be strong, or simply people will not attend. It's too easy to dip in and out. And also, we're seeing that obviously the cost of attendance has come right down. Instead of being in the thousands of dollars for attendance, it's in the couple of hundred, and some have just gone completely free and just looking at a different model. So it's easier to miss, easier to skip, easier to dip in and out. So all about the agenda. It's got to be about that, and then everything else will follow. There's definitely we see a market opportunity for somebody to really crack event content, because nobody's really done it. And in media, we're still missing a global media platform for media. So $600-700 billion global industry. It doesn't have a platform. So good opportunity there. And if it can drive out it's a challenge to the business model of events. Nobody really wants to be in an events company. It's really, really difficult. And as last year's proven, I mean, it's been incredibly challenging, of course. But it was always a precarious business model. You having to invest hugely up front. You're having to take risks that you can sell the tickets on the back end. Inevitably you need to have sponsors to top up the income, and then inevitably the agenda gets slightly diluted and corrupted with sponsors, sales pitches, and it's just always the way it is. And we've kind of accepted that that's maybe as good as it can be. Now this is an intervention. This is an opportunity to completely reset what we need and what our expectations are of events and times when the industry can come together. And I think there's probably some form of hybrid there. And we might separate out perhaps the content stream. I think there's a great opportunity for have some really good content platform that can bring people together. And then other ways of creating that, serendipity and networking and reconnecting with people. They might be separate things. We might look at, in radical rethinking of it, events not making decisions based on their kind of commercial model, because they can hopefully change the commercial model, but really focus on the needs of attendees. That's where you're going to win. And then also we have much more flexibility, right? I mean, Cannes a good example. Nobody's going to Cannes this year, obviously. Like, I just can't see that's going to happen. But why can't Cannes be, instead of 5 days on the south of France, drenched in rosé, why can't it be, monthly events across the year? Cannes is a strong brand, right? It can bring people together. Why can't that be something else? You can use that brand and that power to pull people together in a different way. So I think we've got to, like, as I say, radical rethinking, and use this as an opportunity to kind of reset. Which perhaps leads us on to what we should think about from a marketer perspective. What should the advertisers are pivotal to this stuff, right? The advertisers don't go. There is no event because nobody else comes. How can they be kind of enforcing their views on this?
Yeah, well, I think it's two things. I think there's an opportunity both for the marketing community and also for the event community. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of marketeers and brand leaders that just can't bear these events because they're constantly being chased by media owners who want to sell them something. They're paraded by their agencies. They're trying to be seduced left, right, and center. They are often kind of return back to work and their bosses go, "So what did you learn at that kind of conference?" And they go, "Well, actually, not a great deal in terms of the kind of the content." So I think
hotel room.
Yeah, well, that's in many cases it's true, right? And so fewer and fewer marketeers tend to go to these events. Now, when it becomes a virtual event, it becomes less of an investment in terms of time. So I think they'll be open to it. However, the pressure, as you rightly said, comes down to the agenda and the content, and they will only engage and be involved and invested if the content is deemed provocative enough, inspirational enough, motivating enough, and acute enough to their specific area of expertise. So I think from a marketer perspective, the opportunity for them is to interrogate properly the quality of the agenda and the content. And if it's good enough, if the event organizers have thought well enough about what that's going to look like, then they will engage. The other I think responsibility of marketers, if they do decide to get involved and invest their precious time in attending a virtual conference, then they need to invest in it properly, and try and extract some clear insights, some direction with which they can then go back to their organizations and help inform strategy. So it's a responsibility on both sides. I think that there is a greater chance of them leaning into the event calendar because it's less pressure on their time. However, the content has to be good. And if the content is good, then they will lean in and get more from it. And that will kind of propagate, I think, greater success for the event, system and community.
Yeah. And that's a really good point because, the attendees, so the attendance of this is a budgeting exercise as well, isn't it? I mean, I think certainly for a lot of the agencies, publishers, technology companies, investing, I mean, it's so expensive to go to Cannes. To take a delegation to Cannes is ridiculously expensive. There's been many moans and complaints about that. And even when you're in Cannes, I mean, you just can't, you can't do anything because it's very hard. You've got to take a lot of money to Cannes to go and have fun at Cannes. If I haven't made that clear.
You're not bitter.
It's very expensive. So, but that's a justification you have to make at the beginning of the year. You've got to budget for that. You've got to budget a lot of money for that. And as increasingly as advertisers correctly are zero-based budgeting, kind of really wanting to see what's the value of that before we start shelling out $20,000 for you to go to Cannes. And then therefore the same follows for agencies, publishers, vendors, technologies, anybody else is, what are we going to get out of it? So it's good. So it puts pressure on the attendance financially, but also it puts pressure on the content. The good thing about moving to virtual is that in theory you should have access to better caliber speakers because you can appeal to really top-notch speakers, perhaps even pay them for their time, which would be an amazing thing, and they don't have to fly to the south of France and take 3 days out of their schedule, right? You can have them for 20 minutes and they can be in California and that's no problem. So really the caliber of attendance and the caliber of participation should be higher if it's organized in the right way. I could see some comments.
I saw one flash up then.
Where will we see you two participate face to face? Oh, I don't know.
Good question. Next time we can travel.
We need to do a Media Snack live. Maybe we could take it on tour, Donna. Maybe we can do that. We'll think about that. Thank you, Donna. Let's bring in Lindsay because she was right at the kind of front of this story. Hi, Lindsay.
Hey, how are you?
Lindsay.
Hello.
Good. So I'm sure many of you follow Lindsay, and you'll be aware. If you're not aware, Lindsay's a great writer, reporter, up until recently at AdAge, and you've been at AdAge a while, and just in the process of shifting from AdAge to a great role at Business Insider. So I think next week you'll be Business Insider. But you can see Lindsay's Twitter handle. You can follow her there. So you were kind of leading on this story about there may being a face-to-face Cannes. So tell us what how did that come about? Because subsequently agencies have been saying, we never heard from them. We just read it in the press. How did it come about as a story?
Right. Well, I will give Adweek credit. The day before, I guess they were asking, probably just their sources checking in, seeing what they were hearing on Cannes, and it came about that they were, I guess, forging ahead for an in-person event. And they had asked Cannes for a comment, and they said, yeah, of course. And the next day they came out with this whole statement about how they are indeed planning for an in-person event. If they have to, they can limit capacity. They think it's possible. So, I mean, they gave out a statement, and I just kind of, followed it. And then I asked a bunch of agencies, how plausible is this? How possible can they really have an in-person event? And I think the reaction wasn't that positive, but,
So since you wrote that, and that news has been circulating, in the little bubble of kind of, agency Twitter, which is a dangerous place to kind of listen to and assume that is any sentiment. But it's been, I think, overwhelmingly negative, some quite violently negative, saying it's like tone deaf. How could we, why should we be sitting on yachts in the south of France sipping champagne?
Right. Very
good point. Like, how does that help push our agenda forward?
Yeah.
In the last few days since that kind of story's been circulating, have you got more sentiment back from agency leaders or potential attendees? What do you think is it solidifying against attendance?
I think there's really no way. I mean, I've heard from holding company executives who said, they're still not permitting non-essential travel, and they won't allow their agencies to go. I mean, that spend has to go through them. And I was talking to one executive who was like, we considered maybe sending our UK employees or something. And then he's like, how can we send them to the small enclave of a town to sip rosé and do these silly things, was his quote. It seems so tone deaf. I mean, the agencies don't have the money to send them their employees. They had massive layoffs. So, I mean, for them to go there after they laid off how many thousands of people, I mean, for them to go there and drink rosé and celebrate themselves, and in the time we're in, it's just, and it's also a safety issue. I mean, I was talking to Rob Riley as well. He offered a more positive sentiment a little bit. So he's going to be the WPP global CCO, moving into that role. And he was like, if it was 100% safe, of course I want to go back there. But there are so many hurdles that we would have to go through. I mean, everyone needs to be vaccinated. There are new strains popping up. I mean, it doesn't seem possible. And I think that's the general sentiment out there. Definitely.
Lindsay, once we're kind of hopefully eventually kind of through, the harshness of the pandemic and the lockdown, and we slowly begin to come back to some form of normal, and there is an opportunity for events to be, again, aggregators of people within the industry. Do you think that will happen, or do you think that perhaps the virtual setting is the way forward for them, and it's just cheaper, it's more effective, as long as they can get their systems right and the approach right, it can be just as effective? What you don't get, obviously, is the networking, but the impact in terms of communication can still be there.
I think Cannes was really about going there and the buzz of it all, and having the beaches and the parties and obviously the celebrations and the awards in person and the networking, like you said. I think it's going to be really hard to replicate that in a virtual setting, and I think we saw it last year. I mean, I know Cannes had said they had something like 80,000 people tune in, and but I think people tuned in and tuned out, and it didn't gain as much traction as it normally does. But I mean, we live in a different world now. So I think the virtual element will always be there. And I think some agencies will take advantage of that. And, we also live in a world where we're all questioning things like, how important is it to go to Cannes? I mean, we all are taking environmental issues more seriously, and there's a huge carbon footprint to going to Cannes. And I think, I think it's going to be different, but I think you still need to have that in-person element to really capture the essence of Cannes.
How worried do you think essential, which is which is the owner of Cannes, if you like. How worried do you think that they are? Do you think this is simply a 2-year blip? Or do you think they're going to have to really think about their kind of business model moving forward?
I think they'll have to think about their business model moving forward, and, just adapt. I think everyone needs to adapt to this new world we're living in, and there's going to be permanent change, and they have to make that virtual element work as well. And I think I was talking to some people. I feel like maybe part of this, we're going to have an event, no problem, it's coming in June, is kind of a front for essential investors, just to keep that, bullish front. But they're going to have to adapt for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. David and I were discussing events this week, obviously in preparation for this, and just thinking about what we're going to schedule and where we want to go and what we can invest in. We see potentially that we can start to differentiate between the trade body activity. There's particularly I know lots of trade bodies do lots of different events, and I'm missing loads of people out here. But the ANA are a very event-based kind of organization. The WFA have their Global Marketer Week, really good event. ISBA in the UK, so we have viewers in the UK will be familiar with ISBA, the trade body there, and they have an annual conference, which is good. And many others around the world. And related to the sentiment that David was referencing up front is like what we hear from advertisers, what we hear from our clients, what we hear from marketers is the thing they really, really, really value. And maybe they get it more from these trade body events is this idea of peer networking, is learning from their peers, and not having to stroll the croisette in Cannes and duck and dive away from every vendor left, right, and center. It's like that scene in Airplane, isn't it, in the booking hall. But that actually maybe this might see, perhaps, I think the trade bodies really have an opportunity to create those learning environments, those peer-to-peer learning and networking environments. And then maybe what we might call the more commercial conferences, again, they're brilliant, but the Mexicos, the CES, the Cannes, etc. Those are going to have to radically reinvent, because I'm not sure that they have the hold on the community and the peer-to-peer networking and necessarily the right, as much credibility in terms of the content, and agenda. So I think they really have to radically rethink what they do. If the trade body events stayed reasonably as they were, I think that could, there's a path to success there, and we saw that particularly with the ANA and their use of these event platforms. I think worked really well. They almost just took their exact format, took it virtually. Really good Q&A, really good panel discussion, part live, part pre-recorded, loads of use of video. You felt it's reasonably immersive. That worked quite well. So we're just thinking there could be a divergence between the trade body and what we might call the commercial events.
Yeah, I could see that. And especially if you're thinking about where to send your employees and what you want to spend money on, definitely the things that you're going to get more out of. And I've heard from agencies more and more that the ANA conference is that's becoming more popular, especially since you have that access to marketers as well. So those are potential clients and you get those insights. And I know they're definitely, I've talked to a bunch of agency people who find more value in those type of trade events, definitely. Yeah,
good. I think we'll see more of that. Let me just pull up one other question. Steve Hyde. Hello, Steve. Another long-term loyal viewer. Steve, hello. We kind of touched on this, but I think it's interesting. Can it really ever be the same again? And indeed, should it be? If we take an assumption, which seems to be the sentiment, that no one's going to go to Cannes, right? Nobody at this point is going to be budgeting or planning and committing and to go to Cannes. So they're going to have to rethink that. Can it be the same again? Do we need Cannes, or is it just an award show?
I think people are itching to get back to Cannes, and they do see more value in it as like a networking event and just a good way to kind of unleash a little and celebrate the year they've had. And I think, it's an important event for the industry. It is. Will it be the same again? Will anything be the same again? I don't know. It's so hard to say. it already was losing its relevance, I think, as people saw it as like too ostentatious and a little showy. Should it be? I mean, maybe not. I don't know. I think they should adapt. I mean, like you were saying, make it more valuable. Stop with the vendor onslaught, and just, have maybe a smaller group. I mean, I think you're going to see a smaller turnout anyway to this type of event. Yeah. I think people are going to be utilizing the virtual element of it more and more. So yeah. I don't think it's going to be the same again, but I think there will be an element of it that'll always exist.
It was already changing. If you remember, Tom and I think you and I did an episode about it. And the last time we went, which was probably 2019, we'd noticed that there was less indulgence. It was more intimate. It was more considered. It wasn't as flash as perhaps it had been in previous years. And so it was beginning to become slightly more serious and professional, I think. And there was obviously a lot of fun to be had in the periphery, but it just didn't seem so indulgent. And perhaps, these 2 years where it won't take place will act as even a further catalyst in that. But you're right. I mean, whenever I spoke to certainly agency leaders and marketeers actually, and businesses around Cannes, it was because it was the one opportunity in the year where they could get everybody together. And so whilst there was a lot of, showboating and a little bit too much rosé drinking, it was, there were moments in it where for that, 4 hours on a Tuesday afternoon, you get your entire leadership team together, and there was work done, and it was highly effective in key pockets. But whether we'll see the excesses of 5, 6, 7 years ago, I doubt it.
I thought you were going to say that you get your leadership team together, Tuesday afternoon and drink rosé together. That's basically really what happened.
Sure, there was a bit of that after the meeting.
Yeah. Well, it's good. Listen, Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us. It's really interesting.
Thank you for having me.
I think we'll, we won't be booking our tickets to Nice, but there are some good events coming up in the year, as we've mentioned. Check out the ANA's calendar, check out the WFA. I'm not sure even WFA whether they're going to reschedule their Marketer Week or not. Big breaking news yesterday was that Glastonbury's been cancelled for 2021. Terrible news, second year in a row.
I know.
So if any of you had aspirations to play Glastonbury this year or attend Glastonbury, that's off. But keep plugging away. Listen, good luck with the move. What's your new kind of remit at Business Insider? What are you going to be writing for us?
Yeah, so I'll still be covering advertising, and with a focus on agencies. So I don't think much will change. So definitely we'll be around covering the same type of beat.
Good. Well, good luck with that.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck, Lindsay.
Thanks. Good. That's cool. This is one episode. I'd love to hear what you think. Please leave comments down below. Are you planning to attend Cannes or any similar events this year? And what are your thoughts? How could these things be better? Because like many things, this is an opportunity to reset and rethink and redesign what we want from these things. That's it. So please leave a comment down below. Please subscribe. We go live every Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. UK, and variations of that around the world, talking about some of the issues puzzling or curious to the global media industry. Please click subscribe, and if you click on the bell, you'll be alerted every time that we're planning a live episode every week. But that's it from this week. Thank you very much for watching Media Snack.
See you next time.